Police. They called us weak, fragile, insignificant. An entire alien armada believed they had captured nothing more than a simple curiosity.
The observation deck of the Xenarch Prime had gone silent. Captain Zyx'rath, his scaled face etched with confusion, pressed his clawed hand against the reinforced viewport. Behind him, Lieutenant Kradesh and Engineer Tvor crowded forward, their reptilian eyes wide with disbelief. "She's just eating," whispered Tvor, his tail coiling anxiously. Below them, in the quarantine chamber, the human specimen sat on a standard metal bench. The girl, their scans indicated she was barely 17 standard rotations old, held an object to her face. A hamburger, according to the ship's database. A primitive compressed meat disc between processed grain layers. They had captured her 3 rotations ago when her scout vessel malfunctioned. The Dravian Collective believed they had finally found a defeated species to study. Humans. Fragile. Short-lived. Weak. Everything about them screamed of evolutionary failure. Captain Zyx'rath had commanded thousands of military campaigns. He had stared down the crystalline architects and lived. He had negotiated peace with the Void Singers and earned scars that proved it. But nothing had prepared him for this. "Why does she appear satisfied?" Kradesh asked, his voice trembling slightly. The girl, her ID marked her as Sarah Chen from Earth, took another bite. A thin fluid leaked from the corner of her mouth. She wiped it with the back of her hand, completely unconcerned. Her uniform bore military markings, yet her composure was unlike any soldier they had ever encountered. "I don't understand the behavioral pattern," Tvor muttered, activating the atmospheric scanner. "Her biological stress markers are dropping. Her neural activity shows no signs of fear. She's experiencing contentment." Zyx'rath's dorsal ridge bristled. This was wrong. This was against every protocol. Captured specimens should display submission. They should show desperation. They should recognize the superiority of their captors. Humans, especially a child, should be trembling. Instead, Sarah was humming. A low, undulating sound emerged from her small frame. It was chaotic, unstructured, yet somehow deliberate, intentional. Kradesh's pupils dilated. Among the Dravian, humming was an ancient ritual of power claiming. It was the sound a warrior made before battle. The sound a predator made before the hunt. "She's asserting dominance," Kradesh whispered urgently. "Sir, she's challenging us." "No," Zyx'rath said slowly, studying her more carefully. "Is peaceful. Look at her posture." This was the problem with humans. They made no sense. Their biology was fragmented. Not enough scales, too much exposed skin. Their sensory apparatus was primitive compared to Dravian standards. They lived on a resource-depleted world barely held together by its own gravity. Their ships were held together with what the scans described as duct tape and prayers, whatever those meant. Yet they persisted. They explored. They fought. And now, this girl sat in their custody, eating a sandwich like she was simply between tasks. "Increase the environmental stress," Zyx'rath commanded. "Lower temperatures. Reduce oxygen levels to 18%. See if she'll break." The systems hummed. Sarah Chen stopped humming. Her small hands trembled. Finally, Zyx'rath thought, and she stood up. The captain leaned forward, certain that submission was imminent. Instead, Sarah looked directly up at the observation window. Her eyes, absurdly large and vulnerable by Dravian standards, locked onto his own. She couldn't possibly see through the one-way transparency. The physics made it impossible. Yet in that moment Zyx'rath felt utterly seen. Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled out another hamburger. Kradesh made a strangled sound. Taurus claws scraped against the floor. She brought backup food, Tvor said, horror threading through his voice. She anticipated resource depletion. Sarah opened the wrapping with deliberate slowness, never breaking her gaze from the ceiling. She bit into it with the same serene contentment, chewing methodically, only, as though she sat in hostile alien captivity every rotational cycle. Run a psychological profile, Zyx'rath commanded, his voice strained. The AI responded within moments. Subject shows 0 markers of learned helplessness. Trauma response is minimal. Adaptation rate is 340% above predicted parameters. Confidence levels extreme. Resignation levels non-existent. That's impossible, Kradesh breathed. Zyx'rath's minds, all 3 of them layered and interconnected, began processing information rapidly. He accessed the ship's archives. He pulled up historical data on human expansion, on human wars, on human achievement despite impossible odds. They built civilizations on ice planets and desert worlds. They created art from suffering. They laughed. They created meaning from chaos. They had somehow survived on a single planet with primitive technology, developing not just survival instincts but culture. And this girl, this child, sat in an alien warship, eating a sandwich, absolutely convinced that she would survive this encounter. The terrible, magnificent truth crashed over Captain Zyx'rath like a gravitational wave. Humans weren't weak because they lacked scales or claws or redundant organs. Humans were dangerous because they couldn't comprehend defeat. It wasn't programmed into their biology. They bent when they should break. They improvised when they should surrender. They persisted with an almost religious fervor. "Release her," he said. "Sir." Kradesh stepped forward. "We haven't completed the behavioral assessment." "Release her immediately," Zyx'rath commanded, moving toward the exit. "And scan that sandwich. I want to know its composition." "Captain, this is against protocol." "These creatures don't respond to protocol," Zyx'rath said quietly. "They respond to something else entirely. Something we cannot measure or predict." Within the hour, Sarah Chen was escorted to the shuttle bay. She carried 3 additional sandwiches the medical team had synthesized, her uniform cleaned, her composure intact. As she walked past the observation corridor, she actually smiled at them. Zyx'rath, the Dravian captain, did something his species hadn't done in 3,000 years. He bowed. The shuttle detached from the Xenarch Prime and vanished into warp space. Sarah Chen was gone. Behind him, Kradesh finally asked the question they were all thinking. "What do we do?" Zyx'rath looked at the stars, at the vast emptiness of space, and finally understood why the humans had survived their resource-depleted world.